can see. I wanna go where the lame will walk. I wanna see the sick ones clean, where the deaf can hear and the silent talk. Where are you going?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Thursday evening. Welcome to the Intrepid radio program. With me, your host, Scotty Roberts, right here on Odyssey Radio Network, which you can go look them up. You can see everything this network covers. All different kinds of internet networks, as well as, I think it's 16 to 20 terrestrial radio stations. So go take a peek, see what you think. Also, if you want to watch this show live in simulcast, you can see it on my YouTube channel. And that YouTube channel is simply youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And that's spelled out M-I-S-T-E-R, Mr. Scotty Roberts. And folks, we're going to have a little different show tonight. I've been talking about mysticism, but I made mention of something that some of my older listeners, you've heard all about this stuff before, but my newer listeners, you have not. And so I'm going to do a little show that might dig a little deeper into something that I've already talked about on the show prior incarnation. And that is, while we were talking about mysticism and the things, the experiences that create mysticism, and you create a mystic out of you. It's the visceral experience on the outside combined with the internal consciousness. And it's not something that as something is happening, you're suddenly a mystic. It's the things that happen to you that bring you to that realization that you've had a mystical, if you will, experience. And I like to say of being a mystic, it's kind of like humility. Once you say you've got it, you've lost it. I don't like people who brag about, well, I'm a mystic. Or in many of the paranormal events I've done, no offense to anybody in particular, when it comes to psychic mediums, I have a handful of people that I put a lot of faith in because I have tested them and I know them personally. I understand their credibility. But out in public, many times I get people that will come up to me, usually with a drink in their hand, and they'll go, you know, I'm a psychic. I'm like, well, that's great. Good for you. And I have what I affectionately call my bullshit can. And that's over here. It's the invisible bullshit can that follows me around everywhere in the world, and I take certain things and I toss them in my bullshit can. And that's what I find with a lot of people who make claims about themselves. It's generally, you will find that somebody who is humble, somebody who would be qualified as a mystic or into the mysteries, is not somebody that wears that on a t-shirt. Although that would make a great t-shirt. I'm a mystic. So the experiences you have are the things that really drive what you become, what you appropriate. And so I want to tell you a little story tonight, and this is a story that's not very old. It's about 7 years old. In current events, it's old, but on the grand scheme of the cosmos, it's not. This is something that happened to me. This is what I referenced when I was talking about having had visions. Now, I have to say, first of all, I'm a fairly pragmatic kind of guy. I've got to see it, talk to it, touch it, taste it, handle it, in order to believe that it's so. There are very few things in that realm of not being able to pierce the veil that I put a lot of faith into because I'm a skeptic. Not a dyed-in-the-wool skeptic, but I'm and I've mentioned this before, I have what I call big S skeptics and small s skeptics. The big S skeptic, or the capital S skeptic, is the skeptic who is the denier, I like to call them. They believe that they are being scientific and skeptical and not just denialist, but they're the ones who will go, no, it isn't. No, it doesn't. No, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't exist. Those are the big S skeptics. They don't want to see information, although they might say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They have a starting point of disbelieving anything that's outside what can be proven scientifically or by the scientific method. And I think you lop off a whole lot of the universe when you do that. It's like even Richard Feynman, astrophysicist, contemporary of Einstein and Oppenheimer, said there's a whole lot of things I look into. And he says there's a lot of things I find that I can substantiate, and I believe there's a whole lot of things I don't. And he says, but I don't want to go on believing one thing just in case I come to the end and find out I was wrong all along. So there's an openness I have to certain things. I want to learn things. I want to know things. And we talked about that to a great extent. But on top of all this knowing and researching and understanding, skepticism, scientific method, all of those things that are important things, there's the anecdotal experience. There's that experience that says, I've experienced something that nobody else has experienced, and it did something to me. It either changed me, it altered my way of thinking, it altered my perception of things. And that's kind of the way I am in like paranormal things. I say I've seen too much, I've experienced too much shit, I've been touched, slapped, poked, talked to, conversed with, and I'm not a weird person. I'm not out there, and I'm not weirdo like I'm Napoleon. Oh, and I just heard Josephine talking to me. It's nothing like that. It's that I need to see things and experience them many times in order for me to accept that they are so. And so when I would get into ghost hunting or paranormal investigation, whatever you want to call it, either the commonplace thrill seeker or the highbrow intellectual version of either of those, I want to know things. I want to see things. I want to experience things. And that's why I do the things I do. Can I always define what those things are once I've experienced them, either caught them on film or caught them on tape? No, I can't really define it because you don't always know what's talking to you or what's revealing itself to you. But one thing is in common. Most people will tell you, oh, you doctored that video. Oh, you made that sound. Oh, that was your stomach growling on the tape in the background. There was no EVP. But the thing to remember about me when I approach these things, I always tell people I'm not a rube. I didn't fall off the turnip cart yesterday. I've been doing this for damn near 30 years. And some of the things I've encountered have really established for me, even though it's anecdotal and it's not something you can bring into the laboratory or observe over and over again for the scientific method, at least a given instance, these are things that have established for me that there are things out there that we don't understand, veils we cannot pierce, that while we live in the natural world, we are also part of the supernatural world. They are all one and the same. I have always said, many, many years, I have said the supernatural doesn't exist for me because I believe it's all supernatural. It's all natural. The supernatural is part of the natural world. It's just the parts that we don't understand yet, the things we can't see and define. And maybe not the most perfect example, but I said 8,000 years ago, could we quantify oxygen scientifically? No. We knew we breathed it. We knew we experienced it, but we didn't call it oxygen. We didn't know the chemical compound of oxygen. All we knew was that something invisible that was out there was something that helped us breathe, or that let us breathe altogether. And so I kind of liken it to that. There are things we haven't discovered how to quantify or qualify yet. That doesn't mean they do not exist. Now, having said all that, my experience with visions was zero, zip, nada. It was not something I'd experienced. I thought people who had visions are either really in tune spiritual people, or they're chemically hallucinating, or they're making shit up. And that's the way I viewed visions. I looked at it and said, somebody's got an overactive imagination, and in the post-analysis, started to deem it as being vision, and of that category, something spiritually delivered. And so I would have a problem with that. Now, when I had a vision, when I was having it, I didn't go, oh my God, I'm having a vision. No, I experienced some things. And it was in the experience that I saw things, and it was in the post-experience, the afterward analysis of what it was, that I came to the determination that something mystical had taken place, and that I experienced something on a mystical level. Does that immediately make me a mystic? No. What it made me was somebody who wanted to explore it more and find out more about it. And perhaps becoming the mystic was the process by which I started trying to appropriate information. So I'm going to tell you a little tale, and those of you who are my longtime listeners, you've heard me talk about this. I've actually, and I apologize ahead of time, or maybe the best way to put it is I thank all my new listeners and my radio listeners for being patient with me, because I'm going to, for the YouTube stream, I'm going to show some images. Now, you won't be able to see those images, obviously, if you are on radio. But if you're watching by the YouTube stream, you'll be able to see some of these images. And this is especially for my YouTube audience that I put these up. And so you can see some of the pictures as I talk about this story. And I'll get to those in a little bit here. But for those of you just listening and who are only hearing the audio version on the radio, I'll give you some good visual descriptions. I'm an artist by trade. I'm an illustrator. I'm a designer and all of those things. And I'm a writer. And so what I try to do, people say, Scotty, you sure talk an awful lot. Well, yeah, of course I do. I like to paint pictures with my words. If you can't see what's in my head, I try to go to painstaking lengths to get you to see the imagery I see via words. And so that's what I'm going to do here tonight, and try to paint that picture for you. So I want to get into this experience I had, and there were a couple of distinct times that this happened to me while I was in Egypt. And there may have been other times that were visions that I did not put in that category, things that were revealed, things that I would label as being visionary or something presented to me, some kind of spiritual information or some kind of mystical information. But these are the ones that stand out the most for me, this one in particular. Now, the first time I went to Egypt, and I've been 5 times, I believe, since 2013. The first time I went was January of 2013. And when I was there, it was to go with my friend John Ward, with whom I wrote the book, The Exodus Reality. It was our examination of the Moses character and the historical Exodus. Did these things exist? Were there slaves in Egypt? And so on. We were answering these questions. It wasn't a book so much about, it wasn't a religious book. It wasn't a biblical book, but it was a book about a biblical mystery. And we tried to approach it from an archaeological, a historical, and also a fun approach to this topic. And we put together a book. It's got over 100 illustrations, and it's got 16 pages of full color from our trip. We spent a month traversing Egypt and the Sinai, going to places associated traditionally with the Exodus. And by the way, that book is The Exodus Reality. And you can find it on Amazon anywhere. How's that for an ad? Or you can contact me. I've got a box full of them here. So while I was on that trip, I went to Egypt to explore, to look into my theory. And my theory was, see this guy sitting over my shoulder here? That little bust is a bust of Senenmut. He was the Grand Vizier to Hatshepsut, the female queen of Egypt. And I believe he went on to become the Moses character. And I write all about this in the book. But that's him back there. And so I was in Egypt. I wanted to see sites associated with him. I also wanted to see other things. And we started in Cairo, of course, and we went out to the pyramids at Giza. Then we went to Saqqara, and just to see some things. I was being introduced to some of the things in Egypt I had never seen. And at Saqqara is the stepped pyramid. I'm sure you've seen either documentaries or television shows or mentions or photos of the stepped pyramid of Djoser. And it's outside of Memphis, down at the mouth of the Nile. And so we went down to Saqqara. And outside of Saqqara, not outside, next to the pyramid itself is a courtyard. And there's all kinds of ruins there. And this courtyard has with it some temples that have been reconstructed out of the rubble. Take something that, in my mind's eye, looks about the size of, say, an indoor soccer field. And it's an enclosure. And on each side, not each end, but on each side, there were these coved temples. It stood about, 25 feet tall, maybe 15 feet wide, something like that. And they were all lined up along the different sides, the two sides of this courtyard. And this was called the Head Seb Court. And if you look at a diagram, as a matter of fact, for those of you who are watching, and I'm sorry now to my listeners on the radio, let's see if this is the one. There it is. There's an image I just popped up. Now, if you take a look at that image, you will see right here, I'm pointing, there's the stepped pyramid of Djoser, but right here, down here, is the Hebsed Court. And there's a closer expansion of it. And these are the cove temples that ran along, well, it was only the one side, and there's a couple of them over here. But this big open court here, and I saw something here. So there's a diagram. And but this is where I was when I had the vision. Sitting at the end of this court on a stone that was part of a stone wall over here, right in this area, was where I sat, and I had this vision that lasted only a few seconds, but seemed much longer in my head. So let me get out of that image and go back. So sorry again to you listeners on the radio, you wouldn't see that. There's a courtyard where I sat, where I had this vision. It's right next to, runs right up against the side of the stepped pyramid. And while I was sitting there, I think I was having a cigarette. I just sat there for a smoke and to soak in the area. It was mid-afternoon, and I'm sitting on this big stone at the end of the court, looking back toward the court. And suddenly, in my mind's eye, everything shifted. It was later in the day. It was almost as if, think autumn, and think as the shadows start to get low in the sky in late afternoon, casting long shadows against perhaps even a blue sky. And as I'm looking back on this court, I see the coved temples. By coved, I mean just rounded topped, these little temple shrines all the way along the side. And in the shadow coming off of them, the long shadow, there were these long torches that were lit, stuck in the tops of all of these to light the courtyard. But it was still late afternoon, approaching sunset with the long shadows. And out straight in front of me, coming from the opposite end of the court, and maybe about 30 feet away from me and what I was seeing, I saw a line of Egyptian priests, and it was very ancient. They were all bare-chested, bald. They were wearing the white kilts, and all of them were holding trays like platters in front of them. And on these platters were all different kinds of objects, from jars, alabaster jars, and things like that, although I couldn't define it in that detail while watching it through my mind. And they were walking very slowly toward me, but not really noticing me. And they were chanting. I could hear the chanting. I could smell incense burning. I could feel the slight breeze on the wind. And as they got maybe 20 to 30 feet away from me, they made a right-hand turn to what would be their left, my right, walking toward the cove-top temples. in the courtyard. And so they turned, and they were still chanting. It was very ceremonial. There wasn't like anybody looking over at me or them looking around. I didn't see anybody else in the vision. So this was a ceremony I was viewing. I don't know what ceremony or what it was, but as they started moving to my right toward the coved shrines and temples, with the big step pyramid would be right over my right shoulder right now as I'm viewing this, then it all came to an end. So that was the entirety of the vision itself. I opened my eyes, and I hadn't been dreaming. I wasn't sleeping. I was still holding my cigarette, probably taking a puff of it, and my eyes watered up. Now, I'm not talking emotion. It's not the, oh my God, I just saw something that was really weird and I must cry. It wasn't that. It was from, like, think of encountering something strange or being frightened or scared or surprised or chilled about something. All of a sudden, I got those chills that ran up and my eyes watered. The chill was so extensive. And I said, whoa, and I kind of shook it off a little bit. I go, what was that? And it didn't even strike me as a vision at the time. I thought, wow, I sure have an overactive imagination because I'm sitting here in this court, just chilling in the sun, and I wasn't thinking about what things must have looked like. I just saw the whole scene transform before my eyes. And so I began to wonder about it, and I asked John, who I was with, I said, I just had this thing happen. It was very strange. And he says, well, brother, you seem to have a very overactive imagination. And he says, oh, you had a vision. And I said, that was when he first planted that in my head. And I said, well, I don't have visions. I don't do that. And so it was in the retrospect as I started to look back at this. And while I tried to paint a picture visually with my words, for those of you who can't see it, I'm going to show a picture of what this courtyard looked like. And let's see where I've got it. Court long view. I'm going to click on this. Now, if you look at this, that came up small, and I'm not sure why. But folks, here, I'm going to move over here. You can see it. This is the Hebsed Court. And I'm not sure why that came up in a small image for you, but that's okay. But what you're seeing here, let's see if I can show this one a little larger. There you go. Now, this is a picture that shows the Hebsed Court. And you see I've done a little white figure of myself. This is where I was standing. These are the cove temples over here, those rounded top. And this is the picture I took in this white area here, looking toward the far, and I had been sitting right over there on that rock. And so, sorry again for those of you. You can come, if you don't have a way to look at the YouTube stream right now, you can certainly go over to my YouTube stream anytime after tonight's show, and you can see this stuff. So there it is. That's the Hebsed Court, and that's where I was standing when I saw it. And then there was, oh, by the way, here it is with the stepped pyramid. So you can make out exactly where I was sitting, what was going on. That's all right over here. I was sitting way over here on a rock, and there's the step temple. And all of those priests were walking down this line to me, and they turned this way to go toward the temples. So there you go, folks. There's some of the imagery, and I hope I painted a good enough picture in your heads with my words to describe what I saw. I have not embellished the story whatsoever. This story has remained just as you heard it now for the last 7 years, as I retell the account of the vision. And you know what? We're coming up on the first break. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out to break right now. We're going to pick this story up where I'm leaving off, and we'll talk more about this. I have some more pictures for the YouTube followers on that stream. And again, if you want to go after this radio show, if you're just hearing it audibly, you can go over to Mr. Scotty Roberts over on my YouTube, and you can find this stuff and watch it in archive. So, folks, you're listening to me, Scotty Roberts, right here on the Intrepid radio program, here on the Odyssey Radio Network. You sit tight. We'll be right back. And welcome back, folks, from our break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're watching the Intrepid radio program here on Odyssey Radio Network. You can go check out Odyssey Radio at Odyssey One. And Odyssey is spelt a little differently because it's affectatious for the name. It's instead of the way you would normally spell Odyssey, it's Odyssy with the number 1.com. Odyssey1.com. And you can go hear the live radio over there, or you can stay here in the YouTube channel and you can watch the video. The video is going to have some pictures tonight for those of you listening on the radio. Sorry that you won't be able to see these, but come on over to my YouTube stream at your leisure. This will be archived, and you can see at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. The word Mr. spelled out, Mr. Scotty Roberts, and you can find this archive. And you can look at some of these pictures we're talking about. Now, I had this vision, and I know it was a vision because of the substance of what I saw. Think of a very powerful dream you may have had. I'm not saying it was a mystical experience. The mind works that way while we're sleeping. Our subconscious comes up and enters into our conscious mind while we sleep. So, but I'm trying to draw a comparison. Think of the most powerful dream you've had where you wake up and you have to get your bearings a little bit to say, whoa, what was that? Why was that person there? Or where am I exactly now when you wake up? And it sticks with you half the day because you're like, well, that was so powerful, I felt like it was happening to me. Now, this is the kind of feeling I got with this vision I had of these priests that were walking toward me in ancient Egyptian clothing in this ancient Egyptian site, the Hebsed Court at the stepped pyramid of Djoser in Saqqara, Egypt. Now, it wasn't a dream. I was awake. I was sitting. I was having a cigarette. I was chilling it was actually a nice temperature. It's about 70 degrees there, sitting in the sun. And we were looking around at all kinds of things. John was way over there somewhere digging in something. And I was sitting and just looking back at these temples and enjoying being there. I'm in Egypt for the first time. And I'm seeing things that most people don't normally get to see. And as I'm sitting there, it lasted just a few moments. And I blinked and I was back, but it was like one of those really powerful dreams. And I asked myself, wow, what was that? You know, I was questioning my imagination. So when this happened, I didn't know the purpose of it or why I was shown this. But let me jump far ahead in this story. A year later, we were back there, and we had a friend of ours along, Chris Conway. Now, you might, if you've watched some of the paranormal television shows out there, you might recognize Chris Conway as he was one of the psychic mediums that was on the British show for however you think about it, like it or hate it, real or not real, Most Haunted. And after Derek Acora, their resident psychic and medium, was let go from the show, Chris was one of the mediums. He was a little Scottish medium that came and filled in for a couple of seasons and became their psychic medium. Now, Chris is a friend of ours, and he came over to Egypt with us. And this was a year after this vision. And he sat on this very stone with me where I sat, and I said, Chris, something happened to me a year ago right here on this spot. And he said to me, he says, well, Scotty, he says in his little Scottish accent, he says, there's a ancient Egyptian man that is here now that wants me to communicate some things to you. And what he came up with, the first thing he said, he says, well, and he's naked. And I said, great. I said, you're sitting here and you contacted an ancient naked Egyptian man? And he said, well, he's wearing a nappy, which is the UK version of diaper. I said, I don't know what's worse, a naked man or a man wearing a diaper from ancient times. I said, you think it's a loincloth? And he said, yeah, it's a loincloth. And so he said, this man said, he's connected with you, and that he connected with you here on this very spot last year. And he said he doesn't want to tell me his name. He said he won't tell me his name until he's sure he can trust you. I said, he wants to trust me? And he says he's attached to you because you think the way he thinks. And he says, I'm getting physician, doctor of some kind, philosopher, somebody really that's high up, maybe closer to the royal court back in his day, maybe 3,000, 3,500 years ago. I said, okay. And Chris kept giving me little bits of information about him. And I said, that's really something. Now, that man came up again about a week later on that trip. We were in Luxor, and we went to, remember I mentioned this guy back here, Senenmut, who was the guy that I believe was Moses, the historical Moses. He was the grand amongst 92 royal titles given him by Hatshepsut, the queen pharaoh of Egypt. Among those titles was the grand royal architect. And he built many sites in Egypt. One of them was in Luxor. It was Hatshepsut's funerary temple, Deir el-Bahri. And you can look at pictures of it. I did not add a picture tonight, so I can't show it even to my YouTube audience. But it's this long, narrow, colonnaded temple with ramps that go up to it. And it's set in the Theban mountains, which wrap around it in the back and around to the right, an outcropping. So it's these cliffs that go straight up. And on the other side of those cliffs is the Valley of the Kings. And but her temple is set on the east side, facing the morning sun. And so we are there at that temple, and Chris says, your man that connected with me up in Saqqara is here again. And he says, this time, he says he's clothed, he's wearing a robe, not just the nappy. And he says he's holding out something. He says, what is it? And he closes his eyes. And then he says, oh, what I see is, it's like a ruby. And he says, it's a ruby that's about the size of a tea saucer. And it's gilded around the edges with gold. And he says, he's holding this out to you. He wants you to take it. And I said, what does that mean? I said, how do I take a ruby from him? I said, I'd be glad to find a ruby the size of a tea saucer. But it all tied into some other things. When we talked to John, this was a symbol of something from an organization he had been part of. The name was given that day, and I can't remember it. Chris kind of stumbled it out a bit to John, and John said, you shouldn't know that name. And you shouldn't know about that red ruby. These were symbols of the revision of the ancient order of Luxor, or Thebes. And so some of these bits of information were given to me after the fact. And there were many other things that happened, but this man appeared again. And I will say this, that I have made connections with that particular man on a couple of occasions while here in the States. And I asked Chris Conway about that. I said, now he said that he would never leave Egypt. He would be connected to me, but only when I was in Egypt. Yet there were times where I made some calls out to him mentally, subconsciously. And I said, if you can leave Egypt to communicate with me, are you able to do that? And of course, some of those are completely different stories I'll have to cover another time, but he did manifest himself to me. One instance, we were doing a paranormal investigation, Rocky and John and I, and Rocky said, look, he says, this could be a dark place. You know, if you guys want to pray or call for protection, you know, let's do that. We're driving to this event. And that's when I first called out to this guy. And in my own head, I was like, I feel kind of silly doing this because I'm still got that skeptical edge to me. And I said, this is about 5 years ago. And I said, fellow, I can't remember your name, ancient Egyptian. I said, you said that you'd be connected to me, but only in Egypt. I said, do you have the ability to reach out? And since you're part of that spirit world, do you have the power and the ability to offer protection for where we're going tonight? And I didn't hear any words back. But as I'm sitting in the car, driving down the freeway, my eyes closed and I'm communicating with this guy, one-sided at this point, mind you, I feel as if someone has stood behind me, even though I'm sitting in a chair in the car seat, that somebody's standing behind me, up above me, his chin on my head, and his arms wrapped around my shoulders. And I felt this enfolding, and this head, and I got almost dizzy. I opened my eyes, and I was like, oh man, what was that? And in my mind's eye, I still see him there, enfolding me around the shoulders, and his chin on the top of my head. And so that would be, I don't know if he's, not really this statue. You see a small child's head under his chin. It's kind of like that. And so I felt a protection from him. There were other times I spoke to him and asked for manifestation. And I didn't get everything I was looking for, but I got different things happen. Let's put it that way. So back to this vision now. I'm in the court, the Hebsed court, and I am sitting there after this experience. And as we're walking out, I turned around and I took a picture backwards to where I had been sitting. And let's see if I can, nah, that's not it. So I'm going to turn that one off. Court the long view. That one I did not blow up. I'm sorry about that. But you can see here, here's what I did. I stood there and I took this picture back. And now this, I've already shown this, but folks, and sorry for those of you listening who can't see it, I'm showing the photo looking back. And if you can see my mouse moving here in the video, this right here was the stone I was sitting on when I looked back in this direction. And this path off to the left is where I saw all the priests marching, and they turned right about here, heading toward one of these cove temples. So when I took the picture afterwards, I wanted to capture the scene of this courtyard where I had been sitting, and I had this vision. Now you see the sun here in the shadows? It's almost directly overhead. In the vision, the shadows were cast this way, all the way out almost to the opposite side of the court. And this is where I said up in the tops there were long poles with torches on them that were lighting things. Now I went and I stood in here. This is me that I've drawn in caricature in the white, taking the picture I took of the courtyard. And you see it here in this white frame. So, folks, I went back and I pointed the camera toward where I'd been sitting and where I had seen the vision, and I snapped a shot. Now, fast forward 7 years, okay? I've seen this picture dozens of times. And about 3 months ago, I had a friend who was going to Egypt asked me specifically about the stepped pyramid in Saqqara. And I said, I've got some interesting pictures of Saqqara. So I pulled them up. And then I was going to show her where I had been sitting in this photo. So I called it up. And suddenly, I saw an image I had never seen before in this photo. Now, mind you, this is a good place to remind you, I'm a fairly pragmatic kind of guy. I don't go off the deep end easily. I'm not swayed easily by, oh, did you see that ghost? Yeah. That's not me. I want to see it and experience it. And so I'm not susceptible to suggestion in that sense anyway. But if my wife tells me that makes me look fat, I won't wear it. That's how I'm susceptible to suggestion. So while I'm looking at these pictures, I blow them way up to see if I can see the precise spot where I was sitting, and I was going to show her. And as I scanned over to the left in the photo, something appeared there that I had never noticed before. Emerging from behind the stone wall, you could see the shoulder, arm, hand, and a sliver of the upper torso down to about the hip of somebody emerging from behind the stone wall. Now, you might think, okay, somebody got into the picture I was taking. Now, mind you, I was up in the ruins taking a picture back, so the stone wall partially obscured the far end of the court at an angle, because I'm looking at the court at an angle. Now, what I saw as I started blowing that up, I said, that's unique. What is that? And my initial reaction was, whoa, this is something supernatural that I've captured on. I mean, before I even voiced that, it hit my mind because I said, that is abnormal. And I blew it up, and I want to set the stage for you here. We were there on a day where there was hardly anybody there. There were no tourists milling around. And this figure would be coming from the direction of the corner where the stepped pyramid was, meeting with the court. And the Hebsed court. And there was nobody there, and certainly none of the Egyptians, the darker-skinned Egyptians who lived there, or were the guardians of the site, hired by the Ministry of Antiquities, never walked around bare-chested and bare-armed. All the men there wore galabeas. These are the robes you see them in, the single, simplistic men's robe that goes from the neck all the way to the ground, and the long sleeves that are a little baggy. They're usually gray or light blue as you see them. They're all pretty much the same taupey kind of a gray color, natural fiber. And this was none of those things. This image emerging from the background was bare-chested, bare-armed, and very dark-skinned. And so for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, and those of you who are listening audio on the radio, you can come and view this again anytime you'd like. But this is what I saw. Here's the closer view now. Here is the stone over here on the right of what you're looking at that I was sitting on. If you scan over here to the left, you see emerging from behind this wall, right on the left, this is right in front of where I was standing, but at an angle, you see this right here. Now I'm circling it with my mouse. You see an arm, a shoulder, and an arm and a hand, and part of the torso down to the hip, and then it ends. Now I'm going to show you one more picture, much more close-up than that, and that is this one. Now there you go. There is the image, and I took some liberty of lightening that just a little bit so you could see the detail in this dark image. Now, folks listening on the radio, what you're looking at is a stone that is part of the stone wall right in front of me, but at least 20, 30 feet from me is this figure emerging out from behind as if it's walking in my direction, but you're only seeing the shoulder and the arm and a sliver of torso that's hanging out. Now, this is that figure, and this is the my immediate reaction to this was one of, oh my God, what am I looking at here? This is a figure. It's like every Bigfoot picture you've seen. Let's use that as an example. Every Bigfoot picture you've seen, for the most part, 99% of them, blurry, partially obscured, and so on. That's what this image was. And but it gives you an idea of somebody that's there. And somebody that is either not clothed or they are bare-sleeved for certain. And so this image is what I saw just a few months ago for the first time, of an image that is 7 years old. And my first inclination was, what did I capture here? Now, when I was there and I took this original picture and didn't see anything, I wasn't even expecting to see anything, I stepped out from the ruins. Remember, I'm going to show you this camera angle again. If you look here, if you look really closely, I put the figure that I saw in here. I've constructed a little human being, and then I've got, in dark, I've got the arm hanging there and part of the torso. This is the wall he's emerging out from behind right here. This gray area is my scope of view. This is where I was standing in the ruins. and I took this picture, and because of this angle, I only caught his shoulder and his arm. Now, there was nobody else there. And to prove that, I'm going to show you. Right after I took that picture, I stepped out and took this picture. And this is looking down the same lane, and you see the end of the courtyard. This is just a few moments later. And nobody walked by me, nobody came near me. I'm looking in the same direction, and there is nobody there. Just a few moments later, this is the rock I was sitting on. This is about where that figure would have been. And I was standing probably right in here in this one, looking back in this little stairway here. And then I came out and started walking this way and looked back and took another photo of the scene so I could show the Cove temples. So that gives you an idea of what I was seeing at the time. And there was nobody there. So I think what I've captured here, how would I put this? This is what I mean by anecdotal stories. This is my story. I experienced it. These are my photos, untouched, other than just for the purposes of this show, I lightened that image a little bit so you could see more detail within the dark skin. And other than that, these have been untouched. This is what I took. This is what I did not know was there for 7 years until I looked back at it a few months ago. Now, I'd been talking about this guy that appeared to me through Chris Conway a year after that vision and said that he was attached to me and so on. This is a picture that was taken the day of the vision. And I look back on that and say, why now? Is it just coincidence? Just life is life? Oh, and I just happened to see this in an old picture. Or is there something more to that? A good friend of mine, Sarah Soderlin, who is a psychic medium. She's also, by the way, getting her doctorate in forensic psychology. So she knows her stuff. She's a pretty credible person. She said to me out of the blue, she said, Scotty, what are you doing? What are you conjuring? I said, I'm not conjuring anything. She said, yes, you are. Whether you know it or not, you're conjuring something. She said, what have you been talking about? What have you been engaged in? I said, oh, well, I was talking not long ago about this man that I made connection with in Egypt through Chris Conway. And I said, I've been talking about that type of stuff. And she says, by invoking that and invoking him, you are conjuring him. You're calling him to you. She said, because I get a distinct feeling somebody is reaching out to you. And she said, now that you mention, dude, folks, I'm getting chills going all down my arms right now just from talking about this. And you see me, I'm not emotively driven at the moment. I'm telling you the tale. And I'm getting that. They say, if you could see my arms right now, I'm just filled with goosebumps, hair standing on the end. They say that is the presence of things. It's not just psychological. So she said, you have called this man back into your life. And he's making connection with you. And that conversation went on for hours, trust me, that version of that. But so what I experienced there was a true vision. What it was trying to tell me, I was connected to somebody. That somebody made themselves known to me a year later, which you could say in the other world is a heartbeat. And that person said they're connected to me. I've been back to Egypt several times since that. I've also experienced that person's presence a few times over here. So the mystical experience, that was visceral. That was, well, it was subconscious because it hit my subconscious first. But it became physical because of the place where I was sitting. And I could see these things. And now I have a physical manifestation of something. Somebody might look at that picture and you're going to get skeptics that'll poo-poo it. Oh, somebody was obviously walking that had no shirt on and you caught them in your picture. I'm going to put that up, by the way, again, for those of you who are watching. That picture right there. Somebody might say, well, you obviously just caught a person walking. What I thought was very interesting, too, by the way, as I look at this again, down at the bottom, where the hip joins the leg, it fades out and there's no leg. So you're seeing an image of something obscured, something out of place, something that would not have been there. What was somebody trying to tell me, and why, if somebody out there was trying to communicate information to me, why did they wait 7 years before they revealed the picture to me? 6 years, I'm sorry. I keep saying 7. And I've only got a few minutes left, but I want to grab my journal. This experience that I had at Senenmut's tomb, I've read to you about that before. This is the little leather journal that I carry with me in Egypt. And I don't always take very copious amounts of notes. Sometimes I sit and write about things. And I've got something here that I wrote. Here, I'm going to just flash that up on the screen. You guys can see. You know, that's part of my journal from Egypt that year. And I wrote this about another mild vision I had. It was at the tomb of Ramos, the vizier friend to Amenhotep, son of Hapu, 18th dynasty. And this was on January 31st, 2013. This was a few days before that other vision. I said, I looked at a relief of Ramos, unaware that it was him. Flash of tears, that it was, and a chill, just momentarily. Not tears of emotion, but of presence and logistical, proximal awareness. Then it was gone, just a flash. A few moments later, I sat in the quiet in the outer pillared chamber of this tomb and attempted to clear my head, my mind, just to see what might come my way. And it was very quiet. Then, as a mental image in my mind's eye, are of 3 robed, shaved-headed priests in long white robes aside me, but not aware of me. Just a flash again, then gone. Then, when looking at the relief of the man again, which I now knew was Ramos himself, I saw him seated on a throne, then a man reaching around from behind with a golden dagger. No violence with it, only the ever so slightest hint of possible malevolence. Then it was gone. John told me later that there was nothing about a violent end to Ramos. It could be something completely different metaphorically. I will need to mull this over to see if it is anything other than mental images and imagination. So there you go, folks. We are out of time, I hate to say. We can pick this up and talk about this a little more. One of these days I'll do a 2-hour show. But mull that all over. If you haven't had a chance to see the images, go to my YouTube page and you can see this in a rebroadcast, in archive. I want to thank you for being here. Sorry to end it so abruptly, but we're out of time. Enjoy what you've heard. Seek answers to the things that you know happen to you. They aren't all just imagination. Some of it is the mystical, touching your consciousness, touching your visceral experience. All right, folks. Scotty Roberts signing off. I'll see you again here tomorrow night for our Friday show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here on the Odyssey Radio Network. Talk to you tomorrow. 23-hour break, and we'll be right back. See ya.
Stand by and we will watch the flames burn open on the mountainside. High. And if we should die tonight, we should all die together. Raise a glass of wine for the last time. Cooling out, Father, oh, prepare as we will watch the flames burn open. desolation comes upon the sky. Now I see fire inside the mountain. I see fire burning the trees, and I see fire hollow in soul. I see fire, blood in the breeze, and I hope that you remember me. Oh, should my people fold, and surely I'll do the same. Confined in mountain holes, we got too close to the flame. Calling out, Father, oh, hold fast and we will watch the flames burn open on the mountainside. Desolation comes upon the sky. Now I see fire inside the mountain. I see fire burning the trees, and I see fire hollow in soul. I see fire, blood in the breeze, and I hope that you remember me. And if